morning and welcome to all. I'm George Frampton. I'm a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center. The program this morning and a second one we planned for next week on Thursday, same time, 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight. The programs have been inspired by an international memorandum of understanding that was initiated in Glasgow last winter among governments and companies to work toward 100% sales of zero-emission medium and heavy-duty trucks by 2040. An ambitious goal that now has 16 countries and more than 50 companies signed on. So today we're going to focus on technology and industry and workforce issues. Can this ambitious goal be achieved by manufacturers? The next week, we'll focus on what government would have to do to make this happen, including supporting the manufacturers, creating necessary markets, and making sure that the charging infrastructure gets built. The California organization CalSTART has been working on these issues for years, played a lead role in crystallizing this initiative. And so we're fortunate to have with us this morning to moderate our program, Alicia Gildy, CalSTART's Vice President for Clean Fuel and Infrastructure. Alicia's been involved for quite a while with emissions reductions programs in trucks and the freight industry in the past few years with CalSTART, before that in managing programs at places like the New York Port Authority in New Jersey, Hunts Point in New York, where most of New York's food comes in by truck, and San Pedro in California. Several quick reminders. First, you can follow us on Twitter at AC Global Energy. Use the hashtag AC Energy. Second, if you're on Zoom, we encourage you to submit questions through the Q&A function. Alicia will try to get to as many as she can, but that function doesn't operate, unfortunately, if you are watching us on YouTube. So on to Alicia. Thank you for joining us to moderate today, and over to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, George. I am excited to be moderating this timely discussion and to be joined with four wonderful leaders to focus discussion and action on the future of sustainable transportation and the deployment of zero-emission commercial vehicles. Transportation is a large and fast-growing source of greenhouse gas emissions around the world, and medium and heavy-duty trucks and buses are a significant contributor to climate change.
Hello, everyone. My name is Madeline Janis, and I am bright and early here in Los Angeles, California. I am the executive director of the nonprofit Jobs to Move America, and we are a policy and research center that advocates for more public investment in clean energy and clean transportation that is conditioned or that incentivizes the creation of good jobs and racial and gender equity. So we really represent the idea that every public dollar that goes into this crucial transition is a win-win for communities, workers, companies, and our society at large. And I'm an attorney, as well.
Thank you. Could we move on to the other panelists? I cannot see the other panelists because I'm not, there we go. Bruce Marsh, let me ask you to go next.
Sure, thank you, George. Bruce Marsh from the Deutsche Post DHL Group. I'm based out of Washington, D.C. and work on transportation and sustainability policy for the group of companies, both in the U.S. and across the Americas. And it's great to be here. I'm a big fan. The Atlantic Council has done some amazing work on sustainability, particularly on aviation and now on electrification. And it's great to be here with our partners as well from CalSTART. So thank you.
Thank you. Christopher?
Hi, Christopher Zan, Vice President, Environment and Sustainability and Chief Environmental Counsel at Navistar. Navistar makes international brand trucks and IC school buses. In case you don't recognize that, the first name, anything with an international on it is ours. I am responsible for decarbonization efforts, among other things, and am a pretty long veteran of greenhouse gas control for heavy duty, working on EPA's phase 1 and phase 2 greenhouse gas rules and lots of other things.
Thank you, Andreas.
Yes, hello everyone. Good afternoon from Sweden. I am the head of sustainability at Scania. We are a 130-year-old company manufacturing of trucks, buses, and engines. Yeah, our purpose is to drive the shift towards sustainable transport. So I hope we can get to that now. I see that Alicia is back.
Alicia, thank you. The panelists have introduced themselves. So I'll go back to you to start the panel questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, George. And thank you everyone for your lovely introductions. And sorry about that. Of course, convenient timing for your computer completely to crash down. But we have an important conversation to be had. And with all of these wonderful leaders that we have on this panel, it's time to talk about how do we drive action? What are the big barriers that we need to address to make sure that we're accelerating the pace of the adoption of medium and heavy duty commercial zero emission vehicles? And what does that future look like? And what are the enablers that we have to put in place to really drive this market forward? So what I've done, and now that we've had the wonderful opportunity to introduce our speakers, is I wanted to organize our conversation by 3 main topics. First topic, driving innovation for climate change. Second, accelerating the market and scaling development. And then lastly, how we're promoting partnerships, jobs, and access for all. So first, what I want to do is I want to start off with Madeline. And I had mentioned, I was trying to talk about the available vehicle technologies we have in the marketplace. According to our Global Drive to Zero program, by the end of this year, we're going to have around 544 medium and heavy duty commercial zero emission vehicles available in the marketplace. That's huge. That means the technology is here. So now how do we move that technology forward? And Madeline, what I wanted to hear from you is, why is it important that we drive innovation for climate change? And when I share those numbers to you in terms of the available technologies that we have available in the market, how does that make you feel in terms of the potential of the impact we can be making on climate change, and certainly as we're looking at building a more sustainable ecosystem for transportation?
Yes, thank you. I agree that the opportunity for the purchase and deployment of 544 different types of medium and heavy duty vehicles is very exciting. I think it's also scary, because we're at this crossroads right now, and we really have some big choices to make. And one big choice, of course, is how much are we as a public, our tax dollars, our public resources, our public modes of transportation going to be embracing and adopting that. And obviously that is something that California has innovated with the Clean Trucks Rule, and there are some other really exciting innovation. I think, but the second and third questions are really up for a big question mark. And the second one is, how are we going to drive this? Because we assume we invest big dollars in terms of R&D money, in terms of subsidies and tax credits, in terms of public purchasing and public procurement of these vehicles. If we do it centering communities and workers, then, and making sure that we are achieving good jobs and real manufacturing in the places that are purchasing, we can make this happen faster. If we don't think about this, then we're going to have a ton of opposition from workers and unions and communities who feel left out. And I think I'll leave it at that.
No, thank you so much. I think those are really good points. And when we get into our next talk about the enablers, what do we need to set in motion to really help drive this market? I'm going to really love bringing you into that part of that discussion. Andreas, I want to bring you in next. And Scania has been a really wonderful partner to the Global Drive to Zero program, and is also an endorsing industry partner to the Global Memorandum of Understanding. What has motivated Scania to lead the charge as innovators in manufacturing zero-emission medium and heavy-duty vehicles? And how has this required you to shift a bit of your business model, and especially looking at the geography that Scania covers in terms of supporting customers?
Yeah, so it's quite simple actually. We are of course closely monitoring and following the trends framing the global transport systems, and there is absolutely no doubt for us that the future of transport will be zero emission. So then it's a question about, do you want to lead or do you want to be a follower in that? And we decided to be a lead and to drive the shift towards sustainable transport systems. So we have also set and got a science-based target approved for our carbon reductions, and that is guiding us on all decisions. And then, of course, the technology is simply superior on so many levels. So this will happen. The question is, will it happen fast enough to mitigate the worst effects of global warming? The good news is that heavy commercial transport is moving towards zero-emission solutions in breathtaking pace. We are already there on technology side. There is no major technological challenges remain on the vehicles. I mean, that is solved. And if it goes according to our plans, we will see 10% of our volumes being battery electric by 2025, and as much as 50% could be battery electric by 2030. So that's major. That's the fastest technology adoption that we have ever seen in the transport systems. And our customers loves it. I mean, they're more energy efficient. It's cheaper energy per kilowatt hour. Electricity is much cheaper than any fuels, and it's silence, and there's no vibrations, which means better working environment for the drivers. So now it's all about adoption, and I'm sure we will have reasons to get back to that, Alicia. But for us, endorsing the global MOU is to show support to those governments that will lead, that are committed to lead in creating the necessary conditions for zero-emission transport. Because we have the technology, we know how to do it. Now we have to work together to make it happen.
Yes, beautifully said. Thank you so much, Andreas, and really appreciate Scania as a role model for our manufacturers in terms of the possibility and the potential and making it happen. And I'm really excited about all the vehicle platforms that I'm seeing coming out of Scania to really support the different vehicle segments needed to support the medium and heavy duty market. And we're very pleased to have you as a partner. So thank you so much. Moving on to our next partner, Bruce, with DHL, also an endorsing company to the global MOU and a partner to the Global Drive to Zero program. Would love to hear your perspective on how has DHL approached vehicle decarbonization? Was it all at once? Are you looking at different segments across your fleet? And what does this mean to DHL in terms of being a participant of the global MOU?
Yeah, well, thanks, Alicia. I think maybe I'll start with your last question first. And I think it really, the global MOU very much aligns with our kind of global strategy. You know, we consider ourselves, the Deutsche Post DHL group, really a first mover when it comes to decarbonization. We've been at this for quite a while now. We pledged net zero by 2050. And in doing that, you know, that includes everything in aviation as well, which is particularly difficult to decarbonize. And so, you know, when the MOU was released and the draft was released, we thought that 2040, you know, ambitious and challenging, but still very much in line with what we're hoping to do. And we had last March, so about a year and a half ago, we released our kind of updated and new sustainability roadmap. And we're kind of, everyone is very much focused within the company towards meeting those goals. And I think from a last mile perspective, we're feel very good about that. We feel like we're, you know, we've turned 18. We're now in adulthood, and we're about 25% of the way there. We have about 20,000 EVs, last mile light duty, in our fleet. But then, the other part of the harder part is obviously, and why we're here today, is to talk about the medium and heavy duty vehicles. And I think we've pledged over the next decade to 2030 to be 30%. We're going to use either various sustainable fuels. So that could be electric. We hope to use electric, particularly in the US and some of the other key markets, but we're also looking at some other bridging technologies that make sense as we move towards electric being the ultimate goal. And I think we're also very strategic. I think we have a whole team that's been very focused, razor focused on this, talking to OEMs, our friends at Scania and Navistar. And, we see, in addition to last mile, we see, for example, when you're talking about yard trucks, we have a big yard, warehousing operation. We use a lot of yard trucks. Those we see as being a little easier to electrify over the next decade. Same with recovery trucks. Those trucks we use between airport and service centers. Those are fixed routes, tend to be regional, shorter range. Those are ones that we feel in the shorter term we're going to be able to accomplish faster. It's the longer range that I think that the heavy duty, the line haul, where we're in adolescence, shall we say, and 554 is a great number, or 544. So we're hopeful and we're working towards it every day. And I think as a company we've pledged to $8 billion, 7 billion euro towards this effort in terms of our greening and decarbonization. So very excited about the opportunity.
Great. Well, Bruce, thank you so much. And I'm thinking past to a stakeholder call that I had about 3 years ago where someone said, I don't see long haul transportation for another 10 years. And what's so incredible is that those technologies, though a bit nascent, are coming out into the market. So I think we're going to surpass and beat that timeline of 10 years. I think we're going to be seeing those technologies rolling out on the roads very soon. And that's so encouraging and great to see how DHL is really proactively looking at where you can be introducing zero emission vehicle solutions throughout your fleet and looking at how to plan out for the longer transportation, the longer haul transportation of your vehicles within your fleet. So great work. Thank you so much, Bruce. All right, so next question goes to our friend at Navistar, Chris. So what is Navistar's strategy to accelerate the deployment of zero-emission commercial vehicles in the US? And what does the pipeline of zero-emission platforms look like across the different vehicle segments? And how might that evolve over time? And we were just talking about that in terms of what we're seeing in terms of urban delivery. There's a lot of technologies that are currently on the road moving forward. We want to reach to that long haul transportation in terms of zero emission. Talk to us a little bit about what Navistar is moving forward in the US.
Yeah, so I think what you'll hear from me is kind of similar to what you've heard from the other speakers. A lot of the big choke points are infrastructure, right? So where we led off first, the vehicle behind me is a pickup delivery that's available now. That's the EMV. So it goes out, it does its run, a lot of start and stop, urban, suburban, and then it comes back at the end of the day and can be charged. We felt that was a good place to start. So our school buses, same thing, will go out twice a day, come back in the middle of the day, can be recharged and recharge itself just by the nature of the duty cycle, a lot of starting and stopping. And so because they're also coming back to one spot, you can set up charging infrastructure one time, hopefully, right? And so for us, that was the logical place to start. Where do we go from there? The longer haul, where you're really dependent on having defined charging places and energy getting to those places as you go further and further out where there might not be existing infrastructure. That is going to take more time. Like Andreas said, a lot of the technology is there, but getting it charged where our customers know that they need to go from here to there on a set schedule at a set time frame, and they need to know that they're going to be able to charge. So that's the longer lead time, making sure there's power where it needs to be to charge the vehicle. So that's how we approached it. We started with the things we knew could be done more easily, more quickly, and then move from there.
Well, good. I want to actually stay with you, if you don't mind, Chris, to talk a little bit about our next topic, where we're focusing on accelerated market growth for scale development. And let's get a little bit more into the infrastructure needs. What are those innovative infrastructure solutions that we need to put in place to support building out that ecosystem to support the zero emission commercial vehicles that we want to deploy? It is one of the biggest barriers today, where there's a number of really great efforts to help incentivize, to help support the deployment of infrastructure. Working with our utilities is going to be absolutely critical as it relates to electrification. What do you see are the important innovative infrastructure solutions that we need to be moving forward?
Well, for one thing, I would just say, and this is not really innovative, it's just basic, think about heavy duty when you think about infrastructure.
Yeah.
If you look at some of the national electric vehicle initiative, NEVI, I can't remember what the I stands for, but NEVI is the federal funding for charging infrastructure. I is for infrastructure. It talks a lot about passenger cars, and clearly passenger cars are important. They're the single largest emissions for transport, but we are significant too. And it mostly talks about passenger cars, and the infrastructure is different. We go different places. You cannot get a 60-foot truck into a parking lot to at the grocery store to charge up. It has to be, our infrastructure is going to look more like a parking lot, where the trucks can get in and out, can they turn, all of these basic things that don't look like passenger car systems look like, need to be thought about. The amount of power, right? You might want to get to a 1 megawatt charger at some point for larger vehicles. That's not going to be the same profile as you're going to have with a passenger car. You need more power, different places to park, all of that, just basic stuff, thinking it through. It's not really very difficult. It just needs to be done.
Yes, and it sounds like it's going to be critical to work with different partners to really help set in motion the different aspects of coordinating the deployment of infrastructure and understanding the different challenges around lead time and what it means in terms of scaling and future-proofing infrastructure really to support the demand that's going to be required to power and to charge, especially as we look at the potential of fast charging, high power charging for electric trucks down the road. All right, well, thank you so much for that. Andreas, I want to go to you next, and I would love to hear from you. What do you think are the key drivers to accelerating market growth and scaling the development of commercial zero-emission vehicles? And how does that differ across the different Scania geographies in terms of where you're moving your platforms forward? What are important to you in terms of really supporting this market and its growth?
Well, I think Chris touched upon it, the charging infrastructure, which we could spend the whole morning talking about, but we won't. But I think, first of all, what is crucial to understand about commercial transport is that its decisions or business decisions is highly rational. The products that Chris and my companies are making are means of production. And so the total cost of operation are a central concept here. And we need, to put it simply, regulation and incentives to bring TCO parity between the conventional technology that is here and now and zero emission technology. We're not there. We believe that in some markets in Europe, we are close to being there. We are definitely there on city buses. We might even be there already on urban distribution. But when it comes to long distance, it's a couple of years away, and we need regulation and incentives to bridge that gap as soon as possible for our customers. We are looking very positive to some of the developments in EU now, with bringing commercial transport, heavy transport under the emission trading system. We're looking also very positive at the alternative fuel infrastructure regulations or directive that will prompt countries in the EU to build out fast charging infrastructure. And then we see national very positive signs from France, Germany, the Netherlands, with purchase incentives for battery electric vehicles or road toll waivers or tax deductions. This is all good news if we're going to get the pace needed. I won't touch on charging infrastructure because I think Chris covered that very good, but let me just say that very quickly that when it comes to charging infrastructure, 80% of distribution and regional haul will be able to be covered by destination and depot charging. So don't make it all about fast charging along the roads. That's a crucial part to make this work, but a lot of it will be covered if we can just extend the grid, extend the capacity to where trucks normally go. And then lastly, demand signals, because our customers, the transport operators, they just need to be secure, because there is a premium, of course, on these products, and they need to know that they can get that back. They need to operate these vehicles much more than you need to operate a diesel equivalent. And then we need to be able to work with demand signals, extend the contracts for those transport operators that are prepared to take these investments, and prepared to pay a little bit more for transport in the future. That's crucial to de-risk the investments by our customers.
Very good, Andreas, thank you so much. So definitely we need to keep those demand signals to make sure that we're sending the message that this is the direction we're moving, and making sure that we're putting the policies, the incentives, and the partnerships forward to really support and enable the growth of that market. Going next to Madeline, would love your perspective on incentives. So talking more about incentives. And we know through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, we have a critical opportunity to support building out the zero-emission vehicle ecosystem to enable the adoption of zero-emission vehicles. Would love to understand from you and the role that you play, how do we tap these investments and others like it to really scale the infrastructure needed to advance commercial zero-emission vehicles?
Sure. Thank you, Lisa. I think I want to give a little bit of context for where we are right now in the United States, and why one of the reasons why we are so far from where Europe is. And that is that the current situation for the people who work in medium and heavy duty transportation and the communities that are impacted by by medium and heavy duty transportation is pretty unacceptable. In terms of low wage jobs, enormous health and safety impacts, really unfair impact on communities of color and workers of color, and the exclusion or lack of inclusion of so many people. And so when we talk about, and I love hearing a company, ask for more regulation. That is music. And I wish that were more the case in the United States. It's clear we need regulation, and we need extensive and multiple kinds of public investment, from R&D and tax credits and the procurement of the vehicles, as well as the building of the infrastructure. But we can't do it and expect it to go smoothly or quickly unless we really change things and we build these changes in. So, for example, the operation of long-haul trucking right now in the United States is full of inequities. Oftentimes, trucks are referred to as sweatshops on wheels because of the nature of independent contracting and how drivers are responsible for all the costs and risks inherent in driving, and they end up sleeping in their trucks and everything in their trucks, and not being able to have families. We also don't have we have some companies like Navistar that has a unionized facilities, for example, the one in Chicago. But we have most of the facilities, or a lot of the facilities, are being built in the Deep South, or in places where the wages are low, conditions are not good. So all of these kinds of impacts. Now we know that zero emission vehicles cause less pollution and other impact, but communities need to see the benefits of this public investment for us to have the win-win-win we need. So JMA and our allies, we've been proposing both legislation and policy and something we call community benefits agreements, which are agreements negotiated between communities and workers and their unions and companies to make sure that we're centering the needs of the public as well as the needs of the companies. And so, policies, and we could talk more about this in the next question, but there are policies that really give clear credit in the bidding process or in the award process when companies commit to good paying jobs, hiring practices, deep workforce commitments, and racial and gender equity. And we need to build that in so that the incentives, and we need to make sure that that people are not opposing, that the private sector is not opposing these kinds of initiatives as we've seen in the past.
Thank you so much for that. I think what's really important and what I really appreciate of what's being spelled out in the IIJA is the focus on really empowering equity and making sure that no community is left behind in terms of having access to incentives to help support building out a zero-emission vehicle ecosystem so that they will have access to charging so that they can own their own electric vehicle. I think that's really important, really looking at how we can support and meet the Justice 40 goals. And really making sure that we're intentional in building that in within our incentive programs so that we are seeing that inclusion factor in terms of providing resources to everyone. So thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Lisa, I just want to respond really quickly to that. Most people in this country don't see themselves as being able to afford an electric vehicle. And so what are the other benefits that we need to ensure that communities have to be able to benefit from this transition to the zero emission economy?
I love that you said that because we're going to get to that next. Because I'll be coming right back to you. But to go to Bruce real quick, because I want to get a fleet perspective in terms of, so we've talked about all these different enablers. We've talked about the regulations, the policies, the incentives, the market signals, making sure that we have this very clear outline of goals that we need to meet in order to support that adoption to zero emission commercial vehicles. Talk about, from a fleet perspective, what are the tools, resources, technical assistance that are required to support fleets and making this transition? What are some lessons learned from DHL in terms of, as you've been rolling out these vehicle technologies, that are important lessons that we can be sharing with other fleets as they're evaluating their next steps in terms of making this transformation to zero emission?
Yeah, sure, Alicia. So I think, we've been at this already for a while. And I think one of the key things to say is that we've been willing to try every technology as it comes out. And we have strong relationships with most OEMs, and just given our size, we also happen to have a lot of OEMs as customers. We do a lot of parts moving around the world for a lot of the big OEMs. And that probably works to our favor in some ways. But I think, don't be afraid to experiment first and foremost. I mean, we've been piloting. Hydrogen is an area we've been piloting. Continue to look at and see how it fits into our overall business model and which business units could benefit. And in addition to electric, I have focused mainly on electric so far, but I think, that's one thing. I think really planning ahead. And I think, we're seeing these supply chain issues. We're in the thick of it. I think in talking to the fleet team, we're talking about, for an electric truck, anywhere from 30 to 50 week kind of a lead time if you want to order one now. But that's only part of it. As we've already talked about some of the charging infrastructure challenges. I think depending on the number of locations a fleet wants to or needs to install them, I think it's really important you have a company that can do a turnkey solution at all of them. I think that's one of the things that we've been doing in some of the markets and in Europe in particular. And it's something that we want to do here in the US and are working on that now to try to find a company that can help us and help manage that charging demand. It's a really, because these larger vehicles take so much power to charge, it has to work in that setting, that whether it's that warehouse or a depot. And I think that's something that we need help with. I mean, when we're doing the installations and I mean, those are some of the things. I think some of the employee training is obviously very important to us. Something that as we rolled out a lot of our last mile vehicles in Europe, we put together a little QR code that our drivers, as they got used to driving an EV, they could hit the QR code, scan it, and there was basically a manual. Anything that they needed was through that QR code. But training is obviously very important. The service network, and I think Andreas and Christopher can talk to how important that is. I mean, we know that generally 60%, 70% less maintenance on an electric truck, and it's during its lifetime. But still, you got to have that service, ability to get it serviced if there's a challenge or problem. And I think we've seen software often in first generation trucks. That's half of software is really critical with electric vehicles. And a lot of times first generation, we're still working on getting the kinks out of the software. And so, it takes successive generations. And I think those are some of the things. I think one of the things that we really benefit from, and just to give a plug to CalStart, just trying to navigate all of the incentives that are out there, whether that's North American based or Europe or in another market. It's really challenging, particularly for smaller companies. We have a hard time as a large company trying to track and trying to figure out where can we leverage those incentives. And I think, as I mentioned, the OEMs, they have every prerogative to want to know where those incentives are too. So having, not necessarily committing to buying trucks, but having that good relationship and that two-way communication with them is often also very beneficial as fleets are considering the purchase of new MHDVs.
Great. Well, thank you so much. That's really helpful, Bruce. And I will tell you that we've working with partners like you and working with other fleets and working with our OEMs and working with our infrastructure solution providers. We've been working hard at developing tools and resources to support fleets with their transition to zero emission. We manage California's incentive program for medium and heavy duty zero emission commercial vehicle infrastructure for both electric charging and hydrogen. And we're learning so much about what do we need to provide fleets with to really support their understanding of the technology and what they need to do in terms of the steps to follow forward with in terms of deployment as it relates to selecting the right vehicle type to support their vocational needs, but also making sure to build out the ecosystem to support that fleet. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective. All right, our next and last topic, promoting partnerships, jobs, and access for all. And I really appreciated, Ellen, what you were saying in terms of not everybody can afford a zero emission vehicle. And really, as we're thinking about the commercial vehicle market, I'm thinking about the small fleets. I'm thinking about the independent owner operators. How do we support their ability to make this transformation? And Andreas, I really appreciated the conversation that we had recently, where you were talking about what Scania is doing to help the independent owner operator, the smaller fleet, make this transition to zero emission. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're not doing this of the kindness of our hearts. I mean, this is the bulk of our customers we're talking about. Our customers are small fleet owners, 3 to 8 trucks. That's a typical Scania customer. And I think we all need to realize here that it is asking a lot from these guys to drive this shift. We need to support them, all of us. These are low margin, low risk taking entities. And for starters, and we've already been into this, an electric truck costs 2 to 3 times more than an ICE vehicle. If we're talking fuel cells, that's even more. That's doubling that today. So going from ICE trucks to BEV turns operating expenses and capital expenses around. That's the good news, because that we can handle. Us as an OEM, we're backed by other financing institutions, all this green money. If we could give them good financing conditions, we can a little bit help them out there with this capex challenge. And it's about sharing risks in this transformation. And then I think also even new business models will be key moving forward. We're not sure, we're still in early days, but an assumption I think would be that you would go much more into operational leasing schemes when it comes to these products. Secondly, we will need, we have to become a solution provider here. We need to help our customers with all the operational challenges, all the way from charging infrastructure to software, all the way to assisting these transport operations to actually redesign their flows. They are going to have to do that. Things will not stay the same. And thirdly, and I think this is very, very central, as the technology moves so fast now and in disruptive steps, we have decided to be much more transparent than before. Before we had product launches every 7th year, and it was big hush hush and secrets, and then all of a sudden we launched a new product. Now we know, we tell, we are very transparent with our technology steps, so that is important. And even working with the customers and bringing them into product development, I think will be a key moving forward here. So working together and supporting these SMEs, which is actually is I think will be key.
Oh, that's great, Andreas. Thank you so much. Really appreciate what you're doing to look out for the customer and really helping to enable the success of their adoption. And that is something I know that CalSTART is working really hard as we're structuring incentive programs to support the rollout and deployment of commercial zero-emission vehicles, that we are targeting and providing solution kits and looking at the financing mechanisms to really help the fleet, small fleets, independent owner operators make that transition. So thank you so much. All right, we have one question last to Madeline, and then this is around jobs. And I thought you'd be the perfect person to speak to this. We need to develop the workforce to support this transition. And what does that mean in terms of making sure that we are, as we're looking at economic development opportunities, bringing that benefit to our local communities? How can they be a part of supporting the workforce that we need to build and grow to help make this transformation? We have about 3 minutes before we have to take on Q&A, so I'm going to ask you to keep it a little bit on the shorter side, but thank you, Madeline, for taking that question.
Sure. I think that this is a question not only for communities, but really for companies and for government in terms of the money that we're investing, that we need to invest. I want to give an example of what I think is a real win-win, a transition that we've been working on in the United States around transit buses. And about 2 weeks ago, we announced the signing of our 3rd community benefits agreement with a major manufacturer of electric vehicles. And we have now community benefits agreements with BYD, Proterra, and now New Flyer of America, NFI Group. And what these community benefits agreements do is they ensure that there's a partnership with unions that represent or could represent the workers in these facilities, with workforce development entities, with communities, to ensure equitable hiring, so that, in these agreements, the companies commit to 45 or 50% of new hires coming from historically marginalized groups, promotions, and then the creation of real pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs. Most people can't scan the QR code and read a manual. They really need hands-on training, and they need that to be both pre-apprenticeship to get people ready, and for years of neglect in the educational system and other things, and then actual apprenticeship. And so with this, we have the majority of the transit bus manufacturers that are selling to public agencies that now have robust programs. And this is what we need from other companies across the spectrum who manufacture, construction companies, and then we also need to make sure the operations are good. If we can do all that through policy and these agreements with companies, we're going to have massive support for this transition.
Love it. Thank you so much. Those are great comments, and really appreciate your leadership and what you're doing to help support this evolution that we're making to advance zero-emission commercial vehicles. Wonderful discussion. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. I know we have a number of questions coming into the Q&A, and I want to direct attention to a few of them. And maybe first up, Bruce, I do see a question coming in on, do hydrogen fueled vehicles fit into DHL's strategy?
Yeah, thank you. And I think I mentioned we are experiencing, we have some pilots, I think in Belgium in particular is one area. We've been working with an OEM there and piloting hydrogen trucking. We've done some pilots here in the US as well. But I think, again, we're open to the technology. It has to fit our criteria in terms of where it could fit into our business and our business units. The cost, obviously cost is high on the electric side as well as in hydrogen side. I mean, there are a lot of factors that go into it, but yes, we're looking at it and continuing to look at it. And I think working with OEMs, continuing to communicate with OEMs and understanding kind of where the market is going is for us kind of really important. And we make decisions, kind of rolling decisions. I mean, we have a larger strategy, but obviously we're looking at technology as they advance real time.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think I'll go to Andreas. If you could talk a little bit about Scania's experience with fuel cell technology and a little bit what's going on. There's a comment around Norway project.
Yes, and this is the favorite topics in most conversation I'm having these days. And we are truly believing that fuel cells will play a role, but we believe that battery electric will dominate. And the simple reason is that it will take 2 to 3 times more energy to power a fuel cell truck than a battery electric truck. And the technology development, the cost development on batteries are just staggering. And also, when we're now seeing in our modeling and in our real life usage that they are actually holding for the lifetime of the vehicle. So we're talking 8-10 years. These batteries will still be on 80-90% levels. I mean, so more and more of the question marks around lithium-ion batteries are being turned into exclamation marks. And it is in that sense that you should understand our position on fuel cells. There will be segments, there will be geographies where fuel cells will be a perfect match, we believe, but it will be later and it will not be able to compete with battery electric in most use cases.
Thank you, Andreas. Appreciate that. There's a good question regarding EPA and states can require decarbonization in power plants. Similarly, what exactly could the US federal administration do that would require consumers to only buy zero emission vehicles? Good question. Maybe I can, Madeline, do you want to take that question?
I think there are multiple opportunities to do that. Really, the biggest question is political will. And, I doubt the political will is there yet. But certainly there's nothing keeping Congress from passing a law that requires that. There are regulatory options of the federal government, and states also have a lot of authority to, and they're already using it. State of California is, requiring, and they've already made some requirements like that built in to the transition, over the next 20 years or so. So I think it's how do we do that? But mandates and incentives, there's our big question, right? We've gone more with an incentive model where we've provided incentives to drivers and owners, which has benefited more well-off people. We're providing incentives, but anyway, I think this is a longer question about what the overall big picture plan is. I'm with the kind of implicit idea that the questioner has, that we need to use more mandates to get there. We just need to make sure that those mandates are accompanied by a whole implementation program that supports everyone.
Great, thank you so much. There was a good question that spoke about the supply chain of batteries and looking at how that supports the manufacturing of battery electric commercial vehicles. Maybe, Chris, I can ask you to go into that a little bit more in terms of how does that impact the commercialization of vehicle technologies that you're bringing to market in North America?
Well, obviously, you need the batteries to scale, and the batteries have to be there. That's part of just along with the infrastructure, it's part of the equation. I think we think right now that the supply of batteries will be sufficient to meet the demand, but there are a lot of competing interests looking for the same types of minerals and things like that. So we'll see how things play out. We've had this strange distortion over the past couple of years in the supply chain generally. What kind of effects happen from that are still out there. So I mean, right now, we're pretty confident that we'll be able to get the batteries that we need to get them, especially if we start working on more circular plans where we reuse the batteries and the elements of the batteries for as long as we can. That's going to be key to me too going forward. So that's probably about as specific as I can be on that. That's we think it's going to be there sufficient to meet the needs.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, another good question. This kind of goes back to workforce development, and I really appreciate this question from Hector. What are companies doing around building strong workforce themselves and in their supply chain so that the benefits of electrification don't leave behind working families? And maybe I'll ask Bruce if you want to take that question, and then maybe Andreas if you want to respond as well. And then I think we'll have to wrap up after that.
No, sure. And I'm happy to answer this. I think, I hope I wasn't misunderstood when I talked about, the QR code as a obviously there's a lot more training that goes into, we take pride in our training programs across our business divisions. And, we have a very complex certification program for all of our various, depending on the business unit, lots of certifications required. But I think, our workforce, we're in 216 countries and territories. We are everywhere omnipresent globally. And I think we have, from that urban depot in the middle of a city to that suburban warehouse to that rural route that we're driving and delivering packages. We have our employees that live in those communities, and we have our customers that also live in those communities. And in fact, our customer base is 86% small and medium-sized companies. And so, just given that fact, I think we are very much, we are all in terms of electrifying our fleet. It's good not just for customers, for the communities, but for our workforce. And I think that's going forward. We want to upskill our workers, and we're already, just given the supply chain, the way things are going, our Express division was ranked the #1 employer, best place to work last year. And so, we take it seriously. We continue to make sure that they're a part of the company, that we're all in this together. We have a Go Green certification across the company, and we have targets across every business unit in terms of getting certification for those employees, so that they're also in the game. They also understand the importance of sustainability, and we're all together kind of working towards those goals that I talked about. So,
Well,
that answers the question.
No, it does. It's a wonderful response and very thoughtful. Thank you so much, Bruce, Chris, Madeline, and Andreas. I'm so honored to have had the opportunity to have this conversation with you. I want to thank our audience for all their wonderful questions that you've asked. And unfortunately, our time is up. But I want to thank the Atlantic Council for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful panel, for certainly the leadership of all of our panelists today, and really the opportunity to drive this industry forward and committing to the goals of the global MOU for the Global Drive to Zero program. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. I do want to encourage you to tune in for our next webinar that's happening on Thursday, where we're bringing some government across the globe to talk about driving solutions and policies to support the advancement of commercial zero-emission vehicles. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be at 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. So make sure that you register on the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center's webpage. Again, thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your week.